"I'm going to the garage," Anton said, looking at his wife. "I was knitting." "Are you sure? I'm fed up with your garage." Venus looked at him. "What do you have against it?" "When I didn't have a garage, you told me I didn't do anything," the man said indignantly. "I have nothing against your garage. I just don't understand why you have one when you don't have a car or anything." She looked at him sourly. "I'll have one soon," she replied. Anton replied immediately, "Well, we'll see." Venus smiled, still knitting. They had met at school. He pulled her pigtails. She looked around, scolding him. And when they were in high school, one day Anton sat down at her desk and offered to help her with her algebra homework. Venus really appreciated him then. She stared at the boy and couldn't understand how she hadn't noticed him all these years. At the graduation, the young people were already dancing together. That night, they also watched the sunrise together. "Mom, I think I've met my man." The daughter looked at her. "Well, who is he?" "Anton, from the parallel class." "Oh, that nice boy." "Yes, he is," the girl nodded. The time came when Anton had to leave for the army. Venus was crying inconsolably. He promised her on the platform that he would wait for her. He asked not to promise, but he believed that this girl would be faithful to him. And so it turned out. For 2 years, they wrote letters to each other with all sorts of things, and declarations of love and insults, and they even fought once through paper. Anton decided not to ask for leave so as not to lengthen his term of service. And when he returned, he saw her at the train station. He walked up to her and smiled. And Venus ran to him. "I told the truth. I waited." She hugged him. "Venus, how happy I am. You are a miracle." He hugged her. They went home. Anton's mother knew that her son was coming and was preparing a surprise for them. "Mommy, hello." The boy hugged his mother. "I have missed you so much." "Hello, me too, my son." "Where is your sweetheart?" he asked sarcastically. "Venus, come in." "Mom knows you're here," Anton said loudly. The girl entered the apartment. It was obvious that she was shy. Hello, Venus. Why are you so shy? We're all friends." They sat at the table. Anton's mother cooked something hot. She made some cakes. At some point, the doorbell rang. "Are you waiting for someone?" Anton looked at his mother. "No. Well, I thought I could invite your friends." When the door opened, Venus's mother was standing in the doorway. "Mom, what are you doing here?" her daughter asked. "How could I not be here when my future son-in-law from the army is here?" she wondered. Everyone laughed. They invited the woman to the table. Everything was cordial and homely. "Here, take the keys." Anton's mother handed him a bunch of keys. "What's this about?" "While you were in the army, I collected money for your flat." "Thank you, but I can pay my own money for a flat." "Oh, come on. You'll have time to earn it. It's just a room." The woman smiled and patted her son on the head. "Thank you. It's a very generous gift and, above all, very necessary." Anton smiled. "You're welcome. I think you'll like it. You'll probably get married soon, now that you have a place to live." Anton took a small ring out of his jacket pocket. "Venus, will you be my wife?" The girl burst into tears. She didn't even expect it. "To be honest, when I came to pick you up at the train station, I thought you were going to say something bad to me," she said, and lowered her eyes. "Come on. I love you. We talked so much. You wrote so much to me in letters." He hugged her and smiled. "I love you," she whispered. "And I love you. You have no idea how." The boy hugged her. The mothers looked at each other. There were tears of happiness in their eyes. One thought that her son had found a very good soulmate, and the other that her daughter had found her rock wall, behind which she would feel comfortable. "When is the wedding?" asked Anton's mother. "In a month, probably," said the boy. She had no idea what the deadline was. Venus sat silently, lowered her eyes and listened in silence. Why don't you say anything, my daughter? You must be happy, joyful. Her mother touched her hand. I don't know. I'm so happy I don't know what to say. The evening went very well. Venus even thought that what they said about her mother-in-law was not true. Hers was very good. They did not buy a wedding dress because Venus's mother knew how to sew. From some white fabric, Lisa made her daughter a beautiful white dress. They bought white shoes and a matching veil. The wedding was very modestly celebrated, barely signed. The mothers were present, and there was also a friend of Venus and a friend of Anton. I don't need anything else, Venus smiled at her new husband. Neither do I. As long as you're there, Anton hugged her. God, can everything in my life be so good? The girl couldn't believe it. Well, it seems so. Anton shrugged. Not even a year later, Venus became pregnant. The firstborn, the heir Nikolai, was born. Anton, are you happy about your child? Venus asked her at night. Why are you asking that? Of course she wanted a child. I want you and I to have many children. Her husband looked at her. Everything was going very well. If the baby cried at night, Venus got up to see him once, Anton II. There were no disagreements in the family. The husband helped the young mother in everything. After a while, Venus gave birth to a girl. You said you wanted another heir. Venus laughed. Yes, but I already have an heir, and now my favorite princess has been born, answered Anton, smiling. Everyone took care of the daughter, her grandmothers, her husband, even her older brother. Although he was only a little older, the girl was called Lilia. 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 Her brother cried Lilia. Her mother corrected her and stroked her head. She bent down, feeling a heaviness in her lower abdomen. Lilia was only 1 year old. Venus was very afraid of getting pregnant again, and it turned out that she was. Anton, I'm pregnant again. She looked at her husband. That's good. There will be an extension of the lineage. That's our future. You must be very happy. Her husband looked at her. Again, a son was born, and again, the father was happy. But Venus was not as happy with 3 children as she had been with the first. Since her husband was always away working, she had to do everything alone. There was only one way out, a weekend trip to her grandmother's. The eldest son, Nikolai, stayed with a grandmother, Lilia with the second, and the third, Sahar, with her. Darling, are you tired? Her husband looked at her in the evening. No, I'm fine, Venus replied. Although it wasn't true. We could go to a restaurant and leave the children with their grandmothers. Let them spend the night there and then we can rest, Anton suggested. No way. What kind of restaurants are we going to now? A house full of children. Time passed. The parents weren't getting any younger either. The time came when Nikolai had to go to the 1st grade. Lilia was also drawn to follow her brother. Soon, she would also study Zakar. The youngest was not far behind them. I'm very tired. Venus would sometimes say to her husband sitting on the couch, and don't you think I'm tired? You've been at home on maternity leave all my life, and I'm working like hell. I don't have enough money, but what else can we do? He looked at her, and what should we do? He nodded his head. I don't know. Anton just looked away. The love they had professed at first seemed to have disappeared, but they continued to cling to each other. A neighbor suggested we buy a garage, Anton said one afternoon. Why? Venus didn't understand. If we get a garage, we'll get a car, she replied optimistically. It's like a lonely girl who buys slippers for her house and puts them on the front door believing she'll soon have a man, she said sarcastically. Well, why do you do that? Anton looked at her. You're almost never home and now you're going to disappear into the garage. You'll start rummaging and sorting and I don't see you at all. Okay, if you want, you can go there with me. No, I don't want to. They bought a garage, and as soon as the garage arrived, Anton spent all his free time there. All Venus heard was, I'm going to the garage. I've been to the garage. I'm in the garage. She didn't understand what he was doing there. If other people who had cars spent a lot of time in their garage, what Anton was doing there, she didn't know. Venus, don't worry about me coming so late. Will I stay in the garage? He said at night. What do you mean I'll stay in the garage? Well, it's because I'm comfortable there with all its conditions. I'll stay in the garage, she answered him. Come home immediately, she shouted into the phone. Don't you understand? He said. Yes, I don't understand. I'll go and see what garage you're in. Okay, I'm on my way. At some point, Anton started traveling a lot on business trips. Will you pack my bags for me? Anton looked at Venus as she fried pancakes. Sure, but did they send you on another business trip? She was already doubting his words. Yes, and you don't believe it? He looked like he couldn't understand. I don't know what to believe and what not to believe. He looked at his wife incredulously. If you don't believe me, call my boss. Anton handed her the phone. I'm not calling anywhere. Venus pushed the phone away with her hand and gathered her things in silence. Once again, when Anton left, Venus called her friend. Lana, hello, do you want to rest today? She said. Sure, but you always put the kids first. You've never agreed to come with us, she said. But today I will, Venus told him. She called her mother and asked if she could stay with the kids, because Anton had left and wanted to meet her friend. Of course, bring them to my house. They are always welcome, she replied. The problem with the children was solved and Venus and her friend met at a cafe. Listen, Lana, you know, my husband always disappears into the garage. I mean, if he had a car and he put it there would be no problem. I don't see why not. But he doesn't have a car. She looked at her friend. So we should check it out. Go to the garage and find out what's going on there, Lana advised her. Will you help me? Venus asked her a question. Of course you will. She smiled. That same afternoon they took the keys to the garage and went there. When they opened the door, an empty space opened before them. There were shelves nailed to the sides. Everything was very well equipped. There was a large leather sofa against the wall. He told me that he usually rests here with his friends. Venus looked at her friend. Well, look at these facilities. She showed her hands. Yes, now I see it, well done by putting up the shelves. But we don't even have a garden to put things in, so we could put jars and things in here. Hang some herbs, said Venus. It all depends on your herbs. Come on, did you bring the champagne? Sure. Venus pulled out 2 bottles of champagne and a plastic cup. They immediately opened them, poured themselves, and drank. It's nice here, Lana said. They have a grill, and the couches are soft. The couches are soft, she nodded. Can't they bring girls here? Her friend asked. If there were girls, I'd know, Venus frowned. Well, I don't know. If some friends of mine had a garage that nice, I probably wouldn't mind coming here, Lana laughed. Come on, let's toast to us beauties. Venus walked over to her. Oh, look, what's that shining on the wall? Her friend asked, and walked over to the spot. I don't know, maybe it's jewelry. She shrugged. I wish I had a jewel like that to take home. Lana picked it up. Just as she did, something creaked somewhere. What is it? Venus looked at her. I don't know, she shrugged. It looks like the walls have started to collapse, the woman said. What the hell are you talking about? All the garages are connected to each other, she said. Let me try. Venus walked over to where her friend was, grabbed the shiny surface with her hands, and turned it towards the floor. The wall turned slightly. I told you there was something here. Venus got big eyes. Yeah, friend, I didn't expect that. Lana was surprised. They walked through the wall and into a brightly lit room. There was a good bed in the room, a desk, a computer on it, an armchair, and a TV on the wall. There was a shower stall and a biological toilet. Maybe this is your husband's office, Lana suggested. No, he has an office at home. Why would he need this? She shook her head. Who's there? A child's voice came out. Oh, Lana squealed. Who's speaking? Venus asked. It's me. The boy who was sleeping in the bed got up from under the covers. "Why did you turn on the light here?" "My God, what's going on here?" Lana didn't understand. "I don't understand either. Anton will come tomorrow and I'll ask him everything." Venus looked at him with big eyes. "Are you okay?" Lana ran to the boy. "Yes, I'm fine," she nodded, blinking. "Is no one holding you here?" Lana sat up and asked him. No one is holding me here by force," the boy replied. "So what are you doing here?" Venus asked him. "Asleep." The boy looked at her. "It's understandable. Tell us the truth. If someone is holding you here, we will let you out now, and no one will hurt you anymore." Venus spoke in a very low, calm voice. "I'm fine. I'm waiting here for my father," she replied. The women looked at each other. They were shocked. "What do we do now?" Venus turned to him. "Get out of here and lock the door," she replied. "But we can't leave you here. You're sitting there, no windows, no doors, in a poorly ventilated room." They looked at him. "That's my problem, fine with me." "How did you get in here?" the boy replied. "We have the keys." Venus turned the package over in her hands. The girls went out and did the same thing they had done in the garage. They went back home. Venus sat in the kitchen. She couldn't wait for her husband to come back. When she finally turned the key in the door, he was already standing in the hallway. "Hello? Hello? What are you doing up? I'm waiting for you." Venus looked at him with teary eyes. "What happened?" He walked over and hugged her. "Anton, you and I have lived together for many years. We have 3 children who need care. They want their parents at home. Why are you doing this? I thought you were busy, but you couldn't get the words out. I just looked like I didn't understand. You just... What?" She looked at him. "Lana and I went to your garage today. Do you have a secret room in there? What are you doing there with that child?" Venus screamed that she couldn't calm down. "Tell me, what were you thinking?" "What would I think? You kidnapped the boy, and you're enjoying your pleasures with him," his wife replied. "What are you, stupid?" He grabbed her by the shoulders. "What should I think? You have a secret room in your garage, a little boy sitting there with everything. You haven't told us anything. He doesn't want anything, so I can only come to one conclusion," and his wife screamed, crying. "Let's sit down. I'll explain everything to you." Anton took her by the shoulders and put her on the bed. "Listen to me, but don't swear." Her husband put his arm around her shoulders. "Well, tell me now. Understand me if you can." A tear ran down Anton's cheek. "When you were pregnant for the first time, my friends and I went to a coffee shop, and at one point some girls approached us. We got to know them, had a drink together, it was fun. One of them ended up on my lap at the end of the evening. We were talking. It didn't seem like anything was going to go wrong. But when everyone started to go home, I took her to the entrance and she suggested that I go in. I didn't refuse and went." Anton looked at the floor. "You're telling me that while I was suffering, giving birth to your child, you were cheating on me. Don't scream, you'll wake the children." Her husband reassured her. "How could I not scream? I thought we loved each other, and there would be no betrayals between us. I myself don't understand how this could have happened. We went to his house, and he unpacked the wine. We each had a glass. The next morning, I woke up in his bed. He looked his wife in the eyes. Then they continued looking at each other. Venus was standing in front of him with her hands at her sides. No, I didn't see her again. But a few years later, I found out that he had gotten her pregnant. I don't know what had happened to her, but he had abandoned the baby in the maternity ward. I ran out to look for him. There were a lot of things to do. And by some chance, I found out that David was in an orphanage. I went there right away. Anton stopped talking. And what did they tell you there? Venus couldn't wait. They said they wouldn't give him away. If I wanted to adopt him, my wife, and I would have to go and collect all the papers and officially adopt the child, he said, and looked at his wife in fear. Every day I went to this orphanage and saw the children playing in the yard. I had already become familiar with the boy. Every time he saw me, he would run to me and we would talk through the bars. Well, tell me more about it. Why did you take so long? Venus could not wait for his answer. Yes, I am guilty before you. So I bought the garage. Nobody suggested it to me. I just came up with a plan. I quickly found an advertisement that someone was selling a garage near our house. I spent a lot of time there, prepared a room for him, and one day I went to the orphanage, and when they were walking in the yard, I called David to come to me. I asked her if she wanted to come with me, and she nodded. We held hands and walked out of there. I led the boy to the garage. Are you saying that you stole the child from the orphanage? They are looking for him right now. The woman grabbed her head. Yes, I know they are looking for him, but they will never find him. What are you talking about? She didn't understand. Do you think he will live in that garage all his life? Why not? Every weekend I go to see him. We walk in the park, ride bikes. I will even introduce him to Nikolai later. Anton looked at her. How can that be? Did you have time to do all this? Don't shout, forgive me. He's not someone else's child. He is mine, and that is why you have to accept it. Anton sighed. Venus went into the kitchen. She couldn't understand what her husband had just told her. She dialed her friend's number. She decided to consult her. The women agreed to meet at a cafe near her home. Venus looked at her friend. Can you imagine what my silent husband, who would never hurt a fly in his life, has done? He took a child from the orphanage and kidnapped him. Venus was crying again. Calm down, honey. It's okay. You have to think about it and decide whether you accept this boy or not. And if you do, you should let him go. The orphanage will think it was an escape. You and Anton will do the paperwork, and they will officially hand him over to you. You have a family with 3 children, and they're giving away the 4th one. Lana looked at her. What are you talking about? This child belongs to another woman Anton cheated on me with while I was pregnant, Venus said. I don't see any other way out. Lana shook her head. There was nothing to do. Venus went back home. She couldn't look at her husband. She imagined him hugging the other woman, and it disgusted her. That night they slept separately. When her husband came in, he kissed her and made her coffee. She turned to the wall. Honey, I realize what I've done, but David is my son. I care about him. Why should a child be raised in an orphanage if he has a father? She didn't seem to understand. I understand, but I still can't accept it. Venus looked away, her eyes filled with tears. Have you forgiven me? Anton sat up in bed. I forgave you a long time ago because I love you. He stroked the woman's head. What are we going to do? He took her by the arm. I consulted yesterday. It would be better for him to go back to the orphanage as if he had run away from there himself. So we collect the papers and go there to officially adopt him. Venus nodded her head. You are my golden girl. They did everything as the woman said. David returned to the children's home. There everyone was wondering how such a small child could run for so long in the middle of nowhere. Did something happen to you? David, tell me. Why did you do that? The caretaker asked. I don't want to talk to anyone. The boy didn't look at her. 2 days later, Venus and Anton came and said they wanted to adopt a child. They brought them several boys and girls to choose from. I've seen a white-haired boy running around the building. We'd like to talk to him, Anton said. He's a troublesome child. He ran away from us a while ago. He came back yesterday. If you adopt him, I can't guarantee he won't cause trouble, the woman said as she looked at them. I insist that we talk to this boy. I insist that we talk to this boy, ma'am, please. Call David, he told the woman at the door. She nodded and left. A few minutes later, she returned with David on her arm. The boy looked at his father. She knew him, and she wasn't afraid. Her gaze fell on Venus. What are you doing here? The boy was scared. Do you know him? Anton didn't know what to think. "Yes, I've seen this boy," the man said quickly. "The boy was begging outside the shop and I was buying him candy." "Ah, I see," the manageress nodded. "Do you mind if we adopt David?" Anton turned his attention back to himself. "Gather the papers and we'll be happy to help," the woman said. "Well, when can we pick him up?" Venus looked at the manageress. "When you have the papers, and in the meantime, you can take the boy for a weekend to get to know him better. What a nice place you have here." David looked around the kitchen. "Wait, that's nothing. We'll sell the garage and buy a new flat," Anton replied and smiled. In the evening, the whole family gathered. All the grandparents came too. They were very shocked by the event that had taken place in the family. "Well, Anton, you've done something wrong," his mother-in-law looked at him. "Yes, I agree. It's my fault. But if it hadn't happened, we wouldn't have David at home now." She stroked the boy's head. The paperwork was done. David was officially adopted. Anton even took a DNA test to prove to everyone that he was his real son. Somehow, money came out of nowhere. Anton received a good order, and after completing it, he was given a bonus. It was enough to buy a bigger flat after selling it. "You're not going to sell your garage yet?" His wife looked at him. "Let's wait. Let it be, if he doesn't ask." Anton waved his hand. "Fine, as you wish, but be careful. I know about your secret room." She pointed at him. "Enough." Anton lowered his eyes. He was ashamed of what he had done. Years passed. The children were at school. Nikolai and David were in the same class. One day, Venus saw that the eldest son had a black eye. "Have you had a fight with anyone?" she asked Nikolai. "Don't pay attention," her son said. "What do you mean by ignoring him?" "David, did you see who he was fighting with?" The woman turned to the other son. "I haven't seen anything," she murmured. 2 weeks passed after this conversation. At night, Venus was cooking for them in the kitchen. The little ones were doing their homework. Her husband was still outside. But Nikolai and David hadn't arrived either. "I'm here," Anton heard from the hallway. "Have you seen Nikolai and David in the courtyard?" the woman asked worriedly. "What do you mean?" "They haven't come back from school yet?" "No." Venus shook her head. "I haven't seen them, but I'll go and look in the courtyard." Anton put on his shoes and left the flat. There was no one in the courtyard, but it was too early to be alarmed. He came back into the house and said that the children were old enough to go out for a walk. He went into the kitchen and sat down to dinner. Venus put the food out for them, made tea, and sat down on the stool. Anton could tell that she was worried. "Don't worry." He took her by the arms. "Dear," he said, "you know my heart's not in the right place. Do you think something's wrong?" When night fell and the children still hadn't arrived, everyone began to worry. The grandmothers had gathered in the flat. The children were awake. "We have to call the police," Venus shouted. "Come on, they'll be back now and we'll be famous all over town." "My son is missing. Don't you understand?" the woman shouted. "Okay," her mother-in-law nodded. They called the police. They arrived at their flat 10 minutes later. They took all the boys' statements and photos and left. They heard nothing during the night. In the morning, David came home in shock. "David, where have you been? And where is Nikolai?" She charged on her knees in front of him. "How can I know where your Nikolai is? I haven't seen him at all." He brushed it off and wanted to go to his room. "No, wait," he took her hand. "How did you not see him? You're in the same class. Would you have come home together tonight?" Benno knew he was speaking loudly, but he couldn't help it. "Leave me alone." He glanced at everyone out of the corner of his eye. The police arrived around lunchtime. One son is back, and the other is not. "Don't worry, we'll interview the boy now. Maybe something will turn up," the man in uniform said. "Anton, how long has it been since you went to your garage?" Venus suddenly realized. "I don't know. Why should I go there now?" He looked at her. "It's urgent. Let's go to the garage." The woman grabbed her coat. They reached the garage when they opened the doors. The woman saw traces of blood on the floor. Her heart was beating faster. She walked over to the opposite wall. She picked up the shiny object and turned it all the way. The wall slid back. "Wow," said one of the policemen. "Okay, we'll talk later." Anton looked at him in the small room where there were no windows or doors. There was a child lying on the bed. The pillow was all red and wet. "My child! My child!" The mother collapsed on the bed, but the child was unconscious. "Take him to a hospital immediately," one of the policemen shouted. The brigade arrived very quickly. They loaded the boy onto a stretcher and took him to the hospital. "Doctor, what happened to my son?" Venus ran to the man in the white coat. "He has lost a lot of blood. We have lost time. Tell me, what happened to him?" Venus was about to faint. "He has a wound on his head. We are doing everything we can." "What? A wound on his head?" "Unfortunately, it is true. I am sorry. I have to go." She sat down at the table at the door of her son's room. "He shot me," she said, and she could not understand what was happening. Venus came to for a while and went home. She really hoped that David would clarify the story for them. She told them at home everything that the doctor had explained to her. At that moment, David burst into tears. "Why are you crying? Come on, tell me." Venus ran to him. "Don't cry so much." Anton stopped. "Leave me alone. And if you hadn't brought the child home, nothing would have happened to my son," he shouted. "Come on, tell me what I said." The woman continued to tower over the boy. "I don't know anything." David shook his head. "If you don't tell me what happened right now, I'll hand you over to the police," Venus threatened him. David cried again. "Yesterday, when we went to school, the boys called him to the construction site. There was a fight there," the boy began to say. "So you went there?" "Yes, we did. They started insulting me from the orphanage. And Nikolai didn't even defend me," David said. "So what? Did you shoot him for that?" "Actually, with what? Where did he get it from?" Venus started screaming again. "Calm down. Let him talk." Her husband stopped her. "It all ended at the construction site and everyone dispersed. I asked Nikolai why he didn't defend me. After all, I'm his brother. He looked at me, laughed, and told me that I wasn't his brother. Then, when we got back home, I had the keys to my father's garage and I called Nikolai." The boy sobbed. "And what did you do to him?" "I don't know." Venus couldn't stand it. She ran towards him again. "I didn't do anything to him. I had a gun from the orphanage that fired live ammunition, but the boys converted it to fire iron bullets. I didn't think it would be like this." I cried weakly again. "What are you talking about? How could you shoot your brother?" I didn't understand. He was very angry, and when I pointed the gun at him, I didn't think it would end like this. The bullet went straight into his eye. I actually thought he was dead, so I dragged him into the room and locked him in. Then I walked around the city for a long time, afraid to go home," David recounted. "Why didn't you tell us what you had done in the first place?" Venus cried and slumped in the chair. "She was scared," David admitted honestly. "You were scared and my son could die now." The woman gave him a hateful look. "There are always fights between children," Anton approached. "Let's wait for the doctors, really." "Thanks for being alive. It could be worse. What can I say, thank you?" She looked at her husband. "Yeah, well, you know how it could have turned out. Take that bastard somewhere. I don't want to see you in this flat again. Get out of here." She pointed to the door. Her mother-in-law ran towards her and tried to calm her down. "Honey, what are you talking about?" She patted him. "And you're going with them too?" She cried. Venus and her mother were the only ones left in the house, and the younger children were already asleep. "Mum, I have to go to the hospital," she said. "Yes, daughter, go. I would stay and look after the children." The woman nodded. Venus arrived at the hospital. It turned out that Nikolai had a very rare blood group, and they couldn't find a donor. Venus started calling everyone on the phone. She called Anton, among others. "Look, David has the same blood group," Anton said. "When we did the DNA test with him, They said that my son has a very rare blood group. Bring him here now, the woman shouted. When David was taken to the hospital, it turned out that he and his brother had the same blood group, so he became a donor for his brother. A few days later, Venus was able to visit her son. He was moved from the intensive care unit to a regular room. Nikolai, how are you? His mother ran to him. Mom, it's okay. Don't blame David. It's my fault. It's okay. I'm better now. She adjusted the bandage on her head. How can it be okay? You could lose an eye. Thank God you're alive, Venus bellowed. Well, that's how it should be. Now I'll know not to behave like this. Her son looked at her. Venus sat by the bed and cried. She didn't know what to do next. Mom, she heard her daughter's voice. Lilia, how are you here? She didn't understand. Grandma brought us here. The faces of relatives were already peering into the room. Very well, come in. I think Nikolai will be delighted to see you all here, Venus nodded. When everyone was in the room, the door opened again and the mother-in-law came in. Will they admit me? She asked and looked at her daughter-in-law. Of course, come in, she smiled. Anthony and David joined them at the end. At first, Venus frowned. When she realized that nothing could be done, she turned from anger to mercy. Hello? The doctor entered the room. He kept his eyes fixed on some papers. Hello, everyone greeted them cheerfully. The doctor even gave a little start. Well, what do you think? What a family you have. He patted him on the sleeve. What do you think? Venus looked at the healer. It's okay. The eye is fixed. The metal ball has passed. It hasn't damaged the apple itself, the doctor concluded. Good! Venus snuggled up to her son and started kissing him. I think you can take him home in a week, the doctor smiled. That's very good news, Venus breathed. Now go. Nikolai needs to rest, the doctor said quietly. Venus kissed her son once more, and everyone left the room. Come on, I need to talk to you. She called David after her in the hospital hallway. She turned to her father, not knowing what to do. Go, the man nodded. Venus and David stepped back. She sat him down on the table. She knelt down herself to get to his level. I'm sorry I snapped, but you have to understand that I was afraid for Nikolai's life. Look, you have parents now. You're not alone in this life anymore. From now on, no matter what happens to you, you can always come to us. You don't have to hide anything. We're your closest people. We'll always understand you and support you, she told him, and he just nodded. David, look at me, she shook him. Okay. She looked up with her eyes full of tears. Mom, I'm sorry I love you, were the first words the woman heard from the boy. She hugged him, and they cried together. We're a family, no matter what happens, we should always be together, David told him. Now let's go with the others.